Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jaeger Anderson with JaegerAndersonPhotography.com, and today we are going to be looking at my headshots over the course of the years from when I started photography to present day. If you're a photographer and you're interested in improving your photography, whether that's taking better photos, retouching photos, or just how to market yourself better as a photographer, then please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you never miss when I upload. Earlier today, I was doing some back-end work on my website and I stumbled across some of my older galleries of headshots that I've done, and I thought it'd be fun to compare and contrast some of my early work all the way through the years to currently to what I'm working on right now. Be sure to watch the whole video so you can see how I critique myself over the years, and if you want to learn more about how to improve your photography and some pitfalls to avoid and some tips that might help you, be sure to watch all the way to the end. For this video, I'm only going to be focusing on headshots, or portraits of people that are used specifically for business or marketing purposes. So within this album, there are a series of photos that I took back in 2014, and this is when I first started off as a photographer. And I'm just gonna thumb through these and give you a sense of what I'm working with here. So as you can see, these are pretty rough. And there are a lot of things I am doing wrong. So let's critique it. The most egregious thing that you can see right from the start is that my color balance is way off. The image is far too warm. The color is completely oversaturated and it looks pretty terrible. The other thing that I've done wrong is I've picked a background that isn't appropriate for the shot, right? Either the purple wall or the yellow/green wall. Neither of those are great. They wouldn't be terrible, but they're just not neutral enough and they distract from the context of the person. Another huge mistake is that I think I'm shooting at f2, and it's making the images unnecessarily soft in this instance. Another big problem I have is that I've put my subject far too close to the wall, which is causing there to be shadows cast along. If you're taking a headshot of a person or a portrait of someone, even if it's on a blank background, you want to make sure that there's enough distance from the subject to the wall or to the backdrop to ensure that there isn't a shadow cast on the wall. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. So yeah, that's 2014. That's one of my first series of headshots that I did for this client. Moving on. So this is in 2015, and this is for a young college student for a LinkedIn profile. As you can see, I kind of bumped up my photography game by investing in some strobes, which is really nice. And I also have a nice gray backdrop. So I learned a lot in my first year. However, I'm still making some pretty critical mistakes here. As you can see, I didn't learn about trying to bring my subject off of the wall, so there's some more depth between my subject and the background. And so it's casting a shadow on many of these images. But as you can see, with nice lights, it's not terrible. So this is in 2015. I'm just kind of skipping along a little faster here. Nothing terrible. Putting them on an angle so there isn't an extreme glare on the glasses. However, so I'm not tooting my own horn here, you'll notice that there's a big difference between this photo, which has nice lighting, and the next series of photos, which were also taken in 2015. And these were natural light. Now, I made a mistake here too, in that these photos are, in my opinion, oversaturated. The color balance is also incorrect. They're far too warm for the purposes. So all in all, not super great headshot, in my opinion. Still pretty amateurish as far as what I am looking for. Another mistake here, you can see she still has a hair tie on her wrist. That's a big no-no. You can also see if you zoom in here, I'll zoom in, there are a lot of flyaways and things like that. This was before I invested any time or energy into learning how to retouch photos, and it is reflected in my work. And so that's a change you'll start to see in 2016. So here in 2016, I started to do some retouching, and I started to learn about color grading, I started to learn about color correcting, I started to learn how to dodge and burn, and it makes a huge difference. And while the before and afters are not in here, there is a huge step up in quality, in my opinion, as far as what I've learned in 2015 and what I learned in 2016. I'm still using 2 lights in these situations. These are a little moodier, still for the business purposes. And I think we're moving in the right direction. I know, thinking back now on this experience of this particular client, that I spent a huge amount of time retouching these photos. And now it doesn't take me nearly as long to retouch photos because I've learned a lot better techniques over the course of the years. Let's move on. So here's a nice little fun thing. So this is, I believe, in 2017. And this is a portrait of a professor, and it's taken outside. And I think this is nice because it is an example of when I branch out from taking photos that are very kind of stagnant or on blank backdrops into something that's a little more environmental and something that has a little more interest as far as composition is concerned. I think this is a move in the right direction, and I am starting to see that I am learning things as I progress. So good for me, good for me. Moving on. So this is where things really kind of take a jump in, as far as I'm concerned, in quality. So here we get a little fancier with my techniques. This is a portrait of my good friend, Chris Spencer. And if you are interested in any type of video work, he's a phenomenal videographer. You can find him at The Chris Spencer on Instagram or at thechrisSpencer.com. He's a good friend of mine. Love him to death. And he joined me on a photo shoot because I needed to do a photo shoot and I needed someone to help me set up lights and also to be a stand-in. So here was a test shot that I did. But the reason why this is an elevated shot, or a more professional shot in my opinion, is because I am doing a more fancier technique, which is I'm combining natural light with strobe. So the image, as you can probably guess, is taken outside and is also very bright and very midday and sunny and bright and all that jazz. And so what I've done is I've put him in the shade and I've used a strobe to light him, and then I exposed my settings so that the background doesn't look completely blown out. So that was a lot of fun to do, and he was a great sport about it. And I think this is where my photography starts to elevate in that regard. Moving on. So here is a portrait of former governor of Vermont, Jim Douglas. I think things are moving in the right direction. Very soft, nice gradients across. The glasses are not impeded by the strobes. Super soft bokeh. I'm really pleased with this headshot. We're moving in the right direction. Some areas of improvement, I think, are there could be less distraction in the background. I think there are a lot of wrinkles in the shirt that can be addressed. Some frequency separation would be an excellent way to take care of those. Those sort of modern techniques that I didn't learn about until more recently, I think would have greatly helped with regards to improving the quality of these photos. But all in all, it's an okay shot. I think it's pretty snazzy, but again, kind of a little bit of a busy background. I could have desaturated the background more, and I could have gotten rid of these wrinkles too, or at least softened them some. Moving on. So this is a 2020 headshot. This has no retouching. This was all just nice strobe, soft lighting, and I think it came out very well. Obviously, the subject here is very striking, and I think that makes for a great portrait as well. I think a lot can be said about having good lights and having a nice camera and all of that jazz. But if you don't have a subject who knows how to engage with the camera, or you as a photographer do not know how to elicit that kind of response, then it's not necessarily going to make for a great photo. So it's really important that when you're photographing people, that you have the know-how or the skills or the communication skills to elicit the type of response that you need from your subject so that it makes for a more interesting photograph. Now, moving on to 2021, really recent photo here. So here, as you can see, I'm sort of starting to fall into my style here, right? As far as these business headshots are. So from 2020 to 2021. Now the big difference here is that the retouching, right? I really elevated my game as far as how I go about retouching photos and making sure that the subject looks their absolute best. And I've used a multitude of different techniques. I recreated hair, I took out flyaways, dodging and burning, lots of frequency separation, and I really try to go for a really natural look. And I leave it all out on the field, so they say, and try to make sure that the subject just really pops off the screen and is really interesting and engaging. So that's basically it. But as you can see from this photo to this photo, huge difference between 2014 and 2021. A lot of progress there, I think. Now that we've gone through my embarrassment all the way up to what I'm moderately proud of, at least today, there are some tips and tricks I want to leave with you before we end this video. Tip number one is check out thestrobist.com. It is a phenomenal website, and they have walkthroughs on how to use strobes or off-camera flashes for your photography and how to photograph people better, how to mix light with indoor light and natural light and strobes. A multitude of lessons, and it greatly improved my photography, specifically when working with strobe photography. So that's thestrobist.com, and if you want to improve your portrait taking, be sure to check it out. The other bit of advice that I'd like to leave with you is that editing and retouching your photos is as important as taking a photo itself. If you have a really good photo, but there's hair that's like falling in the subject's face, even if it's just little hairs all over the place, it's going to be distracting to the person who's viewing that photo. And so it's really important to up your game with regards to retouching. I highly recommend using proedu.com as a source for your retouching lessons. I've learned a great deal, and they're my go-to with regards to learning how to better improve my photography retouching. Another great resource that I highly recommend is Flern.com. That's with Aaron Nace. He is a phenomenal instructor, and I've learned a great deal from his lessons as well. And my final tip, and this cannot be overstated enough, is that no matter who you're photographing, it is essential that they feel safe and that they feel comfortable. For many people, having their photograph taken is a very awkward experience. They feel very vulnerable. And as I'm sure you've heard, the camera doesn't lie. And so any type of, uncomfortableness or awkwardness that a person has is gonna be reflected in the camera, in the photograph. And so it's really important that you develop a rapport and learn how to develop a rapport with your subjects very quickly to ensure that you have the best possible photograph that you can get. If you're interested in learning more about how to do that, I highly recommend checking out some of the videos by Peter Hurley. He's a phenomenal headshot photographer, and I've learned a great deal from his YouTube channel as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you at the next one.